Brielle Saunders was halfway through her second cup of hospital coffee, and 3 hours into her shift when a man in a tailored navy coat stepped up to the front desk, dripping with rain and the kind of energy that made people straighten their backs without knowing why. "Hi, I'm here to check in for a meeting with Dr. Patel," he said, his voice smooth and low with just the right amount of impatience under the surface. Brielle blinked, tall, broad-shouldered, clean-shaven. His black hair was still damp from the storm outside, and his jawline looked like it had been carved by someone showing off. She quickly snapped out of it. "Okay, name," Rowan Fletcher, her fingers paused over the keyboard. That name sounded familiar, but she couldn't place it. "All right, Mr. Fletcher, let me just pull up your appointment," she said, typing fast. "You're a little early, but they're just finishing up with another patient." He gave a short nod, then looked around the lobby with a frown. "Is there somewhere quieter I can wait?" Not really," she said, gesturing to the brown faux leather chairs by the window. "You're welcome to sit over there, though." He didn't move. "Unless you want me to sing you a lullaby while you wait," she added dryly, raising an eyebrow. That got a small laugh out of him, the kind of laugh that felt rare, like it didn't come easy. "I'm good," he said, finally heading toward the chairs, but before he turned, he looked back at her. "Thanks, Brielle," she blinked. "How?" He nodded toward the nameplate on her chest. "Name tag." Sharp eye. "Oh, right." He sat down and she tried to focus on her screen, but her brain wasn't cooperating. Where had she heard that name before? It wasn't until lunch that her coworker Marla came over, eyes wide. "Did you see him?" Brielle looked up from her sad vending machine sandwich. "Who?" "The guy who checked in this morning. Rowan Fletcher." "Yeah, why?" Marla leaned in like they were sharing a state secret. "He's the CEO of Fletcher Biomedical. You know, the medical tech company that just donated $5 million to our research wing." Brielle nearly choked. "Wait, what?" Marla nodded, eyes gleaming. "That's him, the billionaire." "No way," Brielle said, shaking her head. "He came in by himself, no entourage, no security, no assistant." "Exactly. That's what makes him even hotter." Brielle tried to ignore the sudden heat crawling up her neck. She wasn't the type to get flustered over a guy billionaire or not. She had rent to pay, night classes to finish, and a car that made a weird clicking noise whenever she turned left. Still, she did think about his eyes more than she meant to. The next time she saw him was 2 days later. It was raining again, because of course it was, and she was logging the new visitor badges when she heard the automatic doors slide open. She looked up and there he was, same coat, same sharp look, like the storm outside had been following him. "Back so soon?" she asked, trying to sound casual. "Turns out I like the coffee here," he said, walking up to the desk. She gave him a look. "You mean the sludge in the break room?" "That's your standard now." "I've had worse," he said with a light shrug. "Besides, I was hoping to run into you." Brielle blinked. "Me, you," he repeated like it was obvious. "You've got a way of making this place feel less." "Hospital, why? Is that a compliment?" "I think so." She tried to hide her smile. "Well, I'm honored." They talked for a few more minutes. He asked about her job. She asked vague questions about his work, pretending she didn't know exactly who he was, and then he left. No meeting, no appointment. Just left and came back again the next week, and the one after that. Each time he stayed a little longer, talked a little more. And slowly, Brielle caught herself looking forward to her shifts, to seeing him walk through those glass doors with that quiet confidence and that always soaked coat. Then one afternoon, he showed up in something different, a charcoal suit pressed to perfection. "Whoa," she said as he approached. "You clean up pretty well." "Big meeting upstairs," he said, "but I figured I'd say hi first." "I'm honored," she teased. He leaned on the counter just slightly. "Dinner?" Her breath caught. "What? Let me take you to dinner." She blinked. "You want to take the hospital clerk to dinner?" "I want to take Brielle Saunders to dinner," he said, his eyes locking on hers. "The woman who makes me laugh when I'm having the worst day. The one who doesn't care that I'm who I am." Her heart pounded in her ears. "I have work, tomorrow, or the next night. I'll wait." She stared at him. This man, this billionaire, was looking at her like she was someone rare, not just a girl behind a desk. And for once, she didn't want to overthink it. "Okay," she said quietly. "Dinner," he smiled. "I'll pick you up Friday, where something you like." She nodded, heart still racing. I usually do. As he walked away, Marla came up behind her, whispering, "Did he just ask you out?" Brielle nodded slowly. "Girl, what are you wearing Friday?" Brielle didn't answer. All she could think about was how Rowan had looked at her like she wasn't just someone he ran into. Like she was the reason he came back. The night air was thick with the scent of rain on hot pavement, the sky still bruised with storm clouds as Brielle stood awkwardly on the steps outside her apartment. She tugged at the hem of her navy wrap dress, wondering for the 100th time if she should have gone with something simpler. But it was too late for second guesses now. A sleek black car pulled up to the curb, not just any car, but a Bentley with headlights that looked like they belonged on a spaceship. The driver stepped out first, opening the back door with practiced ease. Rowan emerged. Brielle's mouth went dry. He wore a black tuxedo, no tie, and a crisp white shirt unbuttoned just enough to look like he didn't care that he looked like $1 million. His hair was pushed back slightly, less rain-soaked than usual but still windswept. "You look." His gaze swept over her with quiet intensity. "Unexpected, in the best possible way. You clean up all right too," she said, glancing at the car. "Though I thought this was dinner, not a red carpet. I figured if I'm going to break your routine, I might as well do it properly." She followed him into the car, the interior cocooned in soft cream leather and the scent of something expensive she couldn't name. The city lights stretched past them as they drove, the silence between them oddly comfortable. "You didn't tell me where we're going," she said after a few blocks, "because I like surprises." "That's either charming or deeply suspicious." Rowan turned to her, his expression unreadable. "I promise if I ever plan to kidnap you, I'll bring snacks." Brielle laughed, unexpected and genuine. "Okay, that's fair." When the car finally stopped, she expected a restaurant. Instead, they arrived in front of a building that looked like it belonged in a fashion magazine floor-to-ceiling glass walls, soft golden lighting inside, and a doorman in a tailored gray uniform who bowed slightly as Rowan stepped out. "This isn't dinner," Brielle said as he offered his hand to help her out. "It is," he replied. "Just not the kind you're used to." Inside, they were led through a quiet atrium and into a private dining room lit only by candles and the shimmer of a crystal chandelier. A table for two waited in the center, dressed in white linen and silver cutlery. A quartet played softly in the corner, the notes of a cello curling through the room like smoke. "You rented out the entire place?" she asked, stunned. "I have my reasons. Which are, I wanted to talk to you without being interrupted." Brielle sat, trying to ignore the way her heart pressed against her ribs. As soon as they were settled, the waitstaff appeared serving a selection of dishes she couldn't pronounce, all paired with wines she'd never tasted. Rowan didn't dominate the conversation like she expected. Instead, he asked questions, real questions. "What made you choose the hospital?" he asked between courses, his eyes never leaving hers. "My mother," she said after a pause. "She was sick for a long time, in and out of facilities. I spent more time in waiting rooms than my own bedroom growing up. That couldn't have been easy. It wasn't. But I learned how to be useful. I learned how to keep things moving when everything felt stuck." He nodded slowly. "You like being the one who holds things together." "I don't know if I like it," she said, "but I'm good at it, and sometimes that matters more." Rowan leaned back, studying her. "Most people try to escape the place that hurt them. You stayed." "I didn't stay," she said, meeting his gaze. "I rebuilt it." Something shifted in his expression, something quieter than admiration, something heavier. "You know," he said after a pause, "I've been in a lot of rooms like this. With a lot of people who smile when they want something. And you're the only person I've ever brought here." That silenced her, not because she didn't believe him, but because she did. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of laughter and too many courses. When they finally stepped outside, the rain had stopped, but the streets still glistened like glass. He walked her to her door, both of them slightly hesitant now that the spell of the evening was ending. "I had a good time," she said, her voice softer than usual. "Even with the cello quartet, especially because of the cello quartet." Rowan stepped closer, not quite touching her. I keep thinking I should explain myself, why I keep showing up, why I asked you out, why I care. You don't owe me anything. I know, that's the problem. I want to owe you something. She swallowed, unsure how to respond to that. I'm not good at this, he said finally. Not the way people expect. Good at what? Letting someone in. Brielle looked at him, then not the billionaire, not the polished man in custom tailoring, but the person underneath, the one who didn't quite know how to let himself be seen. You don't have to be good at it, she said. You just have to want to try. He hesitated for a second, then leaned in and kissed her. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't practiced. It was the kind of kiss that felt like a question and a promise in one, and when he pulled back, he didn't say anything more. He just looked at her like she was the only thing in the city that made sense. Then he turned and walked back to the car, leaving her standing in the doorway with her heart thundering in her chest and the taste of something new on her lips. Brielle stared at her reflection in the mirror the next morning, toothbrush in hand, still dazed. Her lips felt bruised in the best kind of way. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she remembered the way Rowan had looked at her like he was seeing something he didn't know he'd needed. She hadn't expected to hear from him again so soon, but by noon, a delivery arrived at the hospital's front desk. A small cream envelope slid into a bouquet of white anemones and hyacinths. No note, no signature, just a reservation confirmation for an art exhibit that had been sold out for weeks. Marla leaned over her shoulder and whistled. Are you dating him or starring in some kind of billionaire fantasy series? I'm not dating him, Brielle said, sliding the envelope into her bag. You're going to a private exhibit, Bri. You've officially left the land of mortals. She didn't respond. She couldn't not when her entire body was still humming with disbelief. That night, she showed up to the gallery wearing a soft gray dress she'd borrowed from her sister. Not showy, not flashy. Just enough to feel like she belonged among the polished marble and curated lighting. Rowan was already waiting inside, standing beside a sculpture that looked like it had been shaped out of wind. He turned when she walked in, his expression unreadable for a moment before something in his shoulders eased. You came, he said. You made it difficult not to. I wasn't sure if I'd overstepped. You did, she said, stepping closer. But not in a way I minded. They strolled through the exhibit in silence at first, sound muffled by the velvet walls and soft music. The art was abstract, twisting iron forms, stark canvases with streaks of color that looked like emotion caught in motion. Rowan stopped in front of a piece that was nothing but layers of broken glass arranged in a spiral. They called this one Collapse, he said. It was made by someone who lost his wife. Brielle studied the sharp edges. It's beautiful in a brutal way. Grief usually is, she glanced at him. You've lost someone, he didn't answer right away. My brother, 6 years ago, motorcycle accident. He was the better one between us. I doubt that. He was going to be a trauma surgeon. I was the numbers guy. We were supposed to build something together. He'd save lives. I'd make sure we had the infrastructure to support it. But when he died, I took his place. Not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know what else to do. So you built an empire instead. I built a diversion, he said quietly. One that got out of hand. Brielle's voice softened. That's still something. He turned toward her, gaze searching. What about you? What would you be doing if life hadn't shoved you into the hospital system? I wanted to be an architect, she admitted. I liked the idea of creating something solid, something that couldn't fall apart if the wrong person left. So why didn't you? My dad left when I was 13. My mom got sick 2 months later. College applications turned into medical bills. Drafting tables turned into side jobs. It just shifted. And now, I still draw, sometimes, on napkins, grocery receipts. I keep a sketchbook under my bed, half filled. Rowan nodded slowly, like he was cataloging everything she said. As the evening wore on, they ended up in a private lounge tucked behind the main gallery. A single low table, deep couches, and a bottle of red wine already uncorked. I didn't plan this part, he said, but I'm not sorry it happened. Brielle poured herself a glass. You don't strike me as someone who leaves much to chance. I don't. But with you, I keep wanting to. For a moment, the silence between them stretched again, comfortable but charged. She looked at him over the rim of her glass. What happens when this stops feeling new? He didn't hesitate. Then we find out what's underneath it. And if there's nothing, there will be. You sound sure I am, he said. Because I haven't stopped thinking about you since the day you told me off for hovering around the front desk like I own the place. You do own the place. Exactly, he said, leaning back. Which made it even more annoying that I couldn't stop. She laughed, and this time it wasn't nervous or surprised. It was warm, easy, real. But just as the tension began to settle into something more tender, the door to the lounge opened. A woman strode in, tall, sleek, and dressed in a black pantsuit that looked custom-made for confrontation. Her heels clicked across the floor like a metronome for bad news. Rowan, he stood, jaw tightening. Clara. This isn't the time. You've missed 3 board meetings, she said, ignoring Brielle completely, and the Zurich contract is falling through. I told you I'd handle it in the morning. You also told me you weren't distracted. Clearly that was a lie. Brielle rose, heart tightening. I should go. No, Rowan said sharply, but she was already moving. It's fine, she said, not looking at him. You have CEO things to do. This was I'll call you, he said, stepping toward her. She didn't answer. She just walked out, heels echoing against the polished floors, head held high. Outside, the wind had picked up again, sharp and fast. She wrapped her arms around herself, not from the cold, but to keep everything inside from spilling over. He had a life she barely understood, and someone in it who clearly didn't want her there. Brielle didn't answer Rowan's calls. Not the first night, when she tried to convince herself that what she'd felt had been temporary. Not the second, when she replayed Clara's entrance like a scene she didn't belong in. And not the third, when she finally admitted she didn't want to be someone he fit around his real life. By the 4th morning, she couldn't pretend she wasn't waiting for him to show up at the hospital. But he didn't, not that day, not the one after. It was a strange ache, quiet but constant, like a song ending mid-note. At the front desk, she managed the shift schedules and sorted through patient files like always, but her focus had splintered. She tried sketching again during her break, but the pencil felt heavy in her hand. Her lines were too sharp, her curves too tight. She missed him. But she didn't want to be a footnote in someone else's chaos. It was Marla who finally broke the silence. She dropped a newspaper onto Brielle's desk one afternoon, folding her arms like she was expecting a reaction. You might want to look at page 3, she said. Brielle flipped it open. There, beneath a headline about Fletcher Biomedical's latest acquisition, was a full-color photo of Rowan walking out of a boardroom with Clara at his side. But it wasn't the image that made her heart twist. It was the quote underneath. I'm stepping back from daily operations for the foreseeable future, Rowan had said. There are more important things I need to be present for. Brielle stared at the words, stunned. He's not stepping down, Marla added, just reprioritizing. Whatever that means. Brielle didn't respond right away. She folded the paper slowly, set it aside, and stood. I'll be back in 20 minutes. She didn't wait for Marla's response. She just grabbed her coat and headed for the elevator. The sun had finally broken through after days of gray, casting long shadows over the city sidewalks. She walked fast, weaving between pedestrians with a focus born of nerves and something else, something deeper. It took her 11 blocks and a detour through construction to reach the address she remembered from the bouquet delivery label. The building was quiet, with mirrored windows and a concierge who raised an eyebrow as she approached. I'm here to see Rowan Fletcher, she said, her voice steady even while her stomach flipped. The man hesitated. Your name, Brielle Saunders. He picked up the phone, spoke briefly, then gave her a nod. Penthouse. Top floor. The elevator ride felt longer than it was. When the doors opened, she stepped out into a hallway lined with abstract sculptures and floor-to-ceiling windows revealing the city skyline. She knocked once. The door opened before she could knock again. Rowan stood there, barefoot, sleeves rolled up, expression unreadable. I didn't think you'd come, he said. I almost didn't. Do you want to come in? She stepped inside. The apartment was expansive, filled with light and art and silence. No clutter, no noise, just space and stillness. I saw the paper, she said. He nodded. I wanted you to. You stepped back from your company. I paused, he corrected. It'll survive without me for a while. Why? He crossed the room, picking up a glass of water from the marble counter. Because I've spent years building something I thought would make me feel less empty. But it never worked, not until you, she swallowed hard. Rowan, I know I messed up, he interrupted. I should have handled that night differently. Clara's been with the company since the beginning. She's protective of what we built. But she doesn't decide who I let into my life. Brielle took a slow breath. It wasn't just about Clara, it was about you, about where I fit. You don't fit into my life, he said quietly. You are the part that makes it real. She looked at him, unsure whether to believe it until he reached into the inside pocket of his blazer draped across the back of a chair and pulled out her sketchbook, her breath caught. How did you? It fell out of your bag the night of the exhibit. I meant to return it the next day, but then you stopped answering. I started flipping through it. You looked inside. He opened it gently, revealing one of the pages. A drawing of a woman behind a hospital desk, head tilted, eyes thoughtful. The shading was unfinished, but the expression was unmistakable. You drew me, he said. She flushed. It was just a sketch. No, he said. It was you seeing me before I even saw myself. He stepped closer, holding the sketchbook like it was something fragile. I bought a property last year, he said. Downtown, it was meant to be a showroom for our tech. But then I started thinking maybe it could be more, a community space. A gallery, somewhere people like you younger overlooked can create, exhibit, teach. She stared at him, stunned. You want to give me a building? I want to invest in something that matters, he said. And you do, you always have. She blinked, then laughed softly. I don't know whether to kiss you or yell at you for thinking buildings fix everything. They don't, he said, but they're a start. And this isn't about fixing, it's about building something with you, her gaze softened. I don't need a gallery to be with you. I know, he replied, but I want you to have everything you never thought you could ask for. She stepped forward, heart pounding. I'm terrified. So am I, he said, but I'd rather be terrified with you than safe without you. She didn't speak again. She just reached up, wrapped her fingers into the collar of his shirt, and kissed him. Not like the first time, hesitant and searching, but like they were closing the space between them for good. When they finally pulled apart, he rested his forehead against hers. Stay, he whispered. Only if you order Thai, she said, breathless. And promise not to rename the gallery after me. No promises, he said, smiling for the first time in days. That night they sat on the floor of his penthouse, takeout containers spread between them, her sketchbook open on the coffee table. And for the first time in a long time, Brielle didn't feel like she was holding anything together. She felt like she belonged. The air inside the gallery was alive with quiet anticipation. Low music hummed from hidden speakers, and warm amber lighting spilled across the polished floors. Pieces of art lined the walls, some from local students, some from emerging artists Brielle had personally invited. The doors had only just opened, but already the space echoed with the soft murmur of admiration. Brielle stood near the back, her hands folded tightly in front of her, trying to appear calm. She wore an emerald green dress that skimmed her figure, her curls swept to one side. Beside her, Rowan adjusted the cuffs of his dark suit, his expression focused. The lighting on the west wall needs adjusting, she whispered. He leaned slightly toward her. It's already been fixed. And the catering, did they remember the vegan? Yes, you double-checked 3 times, she exhaled. Right, sorry, stop apologizing. This entire night is because of you, she glanced around. It's because of us. Their eyes met. He reached for her hand. Are you ready for your speech? He asked. I wrote it on a napkin, she whispered. That's fitting. As the gallery filled, the space took on a soft buzz. People approached Brielle to offer congratulations, artists, curators, even a few city officials. She smiled, thanked them, but her gaze kept returning to the far wall where her own piece hung. A pencil drawing of an open door, light pouring through it, with a figure standing just beyond the threshold. It was the first time she'd ever exhibited anything publicly. When the time came, Rowan stepped aside and let her walk alone to the small podium near the center of the room. A hush settled over the crowd. She cleared her throat. I'm not used to speaking in front of people, she began, her voice steady despite her pulse. Most of my work happens behind a desk or on paper. But this space, this gallery, was built to give voices to those who usually stay quiet. She paused, letting her eyes scan the room. This isn't just a space for art. It's a space for second chances, for people who have been told no too often. For people who need light when everything feels dark. She looked at Rowan then, for people who thought they'd never be seen. A quiet stillness followed her final words, and then applause broke out, warm and sincere. She stepped down, cheeks flushed, and Rowan caught her hand again. He didn't say anything he didn't need to. Later that evening, after the last guest had left and the lights had been dimmed, they walked through the gallery in silence. Brielle carried her heels in one hand, her bare feet whispering against the floor. "You didn't tell me how proud you were," she said. "I thought it was obvious." She stopped in front of the open door drawing. "I was terrified to hang this, because it was personal, because it was honest." Rowan stepped behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. "That's what makes it powerful." She leaned into him, resting her head back against his shoulder. "This used to feel impossible, all of it, us, this place, my work. I used to think I was meant to support everyone else's dreams, not live mine." He pressed his lips to her temple. "You were never meant to be in the background, Brielle." She turned in his arms, her fingers finding the lapels of his jacket. "I used to tell myself that love wasn't worth the risk," she said. "That needing someone made things messy. And now I know the risk is the point." He kissed her then, slow and deep, the kind of kiss that felt like a promise sealed in silence. When they parted, she looked up at him. "You know, we never went dancing," she said. "I thought you hated dancing." "I hate bad dancing. I never said I hated dancing with you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone, scrolling until a soft jazz tune began to play. He held out his hand and she took it. They moved slowly across the floor, surrounded by art and empty wine glasses and the lingering scent of paint and possibility. As the night stretched on, they didn't speak. They didn't need to. Every step, every glance, every touch said enough. Months passed. The gallery became more than a space, it became a movement. Brielle taught weekly classes to high school students who had never picked up charcoal before. Rowan appeared less in boardrooms and more in studio corners, learning the difference between graphite and ink wash, always asking questions but never offering answers where they weren't needed. They traveled when they could, short trips, quiet places. He took her to an artist's retreat in Provence. She dragged him to a chaotic street market in Mexico City. They learned each other's rhythms, how she liked her coffee lukewarm and how he only slept with the window open. Their lives wove together not with fireworks but with threads pulled tight by choice. On a quiet Sunday morning, Brielle returned from the kitchen carrying a tray of tea and toast. Rowan stood in front of the open door drawing in their hallway, a ring box in his hand. She stopped. He didn't kneel. He didn't make a speech, he simply held out the box. "And said, 'Let's keep building.'" She nodded, eyes stinging, laugh caught in her throat. "Yes, let's." They married under a canopy of string lights in the gallery itself, surrounded by art and flowers and people who had become family. There was no drama, no spectacle, just joy. Simple, steady, overwhelming joy. Years later, Brielle stood in front of a new class of students, her sketchbook in one hand and charcoal in the other. She glanced toward the back of the room where Rowan leaned against the doorframe, a toddler clinging to his leg and a baby carrier strapped to his chest. He raised a brow, she grinned. Life hadn't gotten simpler, but it had gotten full. And in every messy, beautiful moment, they chose each other. Always.